Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody so much for joining. We're so glad you're here. We want your questions. Please put your questions in the chat if they make sense in the context of the conversation. We'll grab them as we go. If not, we'll pick them up at the end as time permits. So thank you all so much for being here. This is what we're talking about today. GRC definitely misunderstood the value of it. What ROI, how it really relates to this topic, and then of course communication and really presenting that value is huge. Okay, so GRC feels expensive. I deal with this every day. Oh, why does that cost so much? Oh gosh. And it's like this mindset problem. It's so much geared toward, oh, this is overhead. This is an expense. I have to do this. It's tied to audits. Joe, let's just that pyramid or triangle is upside down. So what is your take on why this thinking is just upside down? Because that's quite frankly the way it is.
Yeah, and the inverted pyramid is pretty much the perfect way to describe it. It's like you said, a lot of management, senior management boards have this mindset of this is a requirement, it's a sunk cost, we have to do it
Ugh,
regardless, just because we have to pass this audit or there's a regulation we have to be compliant with without realizing the other side of it, which is it can actually be integrated in with
yep.
your objectives and strategy to drive value. And I don't know, along the way, that GRC group got siloed a little bit to just like, oh, it's the necessary evil, so to speak.
Yeah.
Oh, you're here to audit, we got to, and so that mindset is slowly starting to shift, but it's
I hope
not there
in
yet.
some ways, but it feels very slow, Joe, in a lot of ways.
But in my experience, whether it's working on the consulting side or on the industry side, the number one question always comes to how much is it going to cost me?
Yeah.
And that's the mindset that does need to shift of what other value other than us saying we're compliant or we passed an assessment can we utilize off of this. So yeah,
Yeah.
it just it's that negative mindset, that stereotype which needs to change.
Yeah, I mean, cost is real. I get it. I'll give this very real world example that, something we're doing here at Hotman Group. We just switched to a PEO for all of our HR stuff. And for people who don't know what that is, it's basically outsourced payroll. But they help you with staying on top of laws. They give you better benefits. There's like all this stuff. So when you compare it, you're like, wow, look how expensive that is. You're like, dang, that's a lot more than we pay right now. But then if you start to really think about, but wait, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this, like all this other stuff. I can't offer as good of benefits. Like there's so many other things. There's the return mindset. Like, yes, this is going to be a significant investment, more so than what I'm expecting, but opportunity cost is not free. I just told someone that this morning. Like, oh, well, that's really expensive. Okay, but if you're doing it highly manual and you're having to piece part it together, or worse yet, you're not doing it at all. So you're introducing risks into the organization. Hello, that's not free, people. That's not free at all. There's a cost associated with that. So it's real easy to just go, oh, well, wow, that's expensive. Okay, well, look at the whole picture. And that's really what you're talking about here is, that's what the ROI is what am I going to invest in it? What is it going to take off my plate? What's it going to clean up? What are my other opportunity costs that are being put in the wrong direction, quite frankly, that I can then free up those resources, free up the time because I have this now. That's really the whole like analysis of this thing versus, oh crap, we just got to do this thing. How much does that cost again? Well, that's awful expensive.
Exactly. And then when it comes off that cost piece, it's okay. It's that second part. It's that assumed risk reduction. Okay, we passed this
Yeah.
audit. We just have
Yep.
to do the bare minimum to do the audit, not thinking about, okay, what about continuous monitoring or continuous evolvement of, governance, risk, compliance, controls.
Oh yeah.
And, one of the things, the examples I'll give right now is a lot of clients, customers, companies right now are going through sales kickoff and growth
They are.
kickoff.
Yep.
And whenever I've talked to my friends and colleagues who are in the GRC world, I'm like, well, are you guys present at those? no, why would we need to go to that? And it just becomes
Ooh, yeah.
there's another example, like,
The silo. Yes.
it's that siloed group, like, does sales even know that if they could just speak a little bit or include someone from your group in their
Yeah.
sales discussions, how much, value it could bring to that discussion? And
Yeah.
yeah, it's just it's always for us in GRC, I think it's always gonna be fighting uphill to, effectively communicate to those other departments why it's needed, but that's
Yeah.
what we have to do. So,
Yeah.
the only way
You
to right size that pyramid is for the GRC folks to start communicating company-wide and enterprise-wide.
Yeah, no, that's great. Risk is really where everything hinges. That is what we're doing. We're not passing audits. That's not what we're doing here. And so compliance really is not the answer. Compliance has become like this great urgency thing because customers are asking, got to get this, got to do this, got to do that. I get it. There is a tactical need that we need to satisfy these things, but it should be in the context of the broader strategy. You brought up an excellent point, a sales kickoff. Well, hello, compliance is directly tied to revenue. So why is that not being considered? What are the objectives of the organization? What is the go-to-market strategy? What are the expansion things that we're thinking about? And then where would compliance need to be in place to help open those doors? That's where it's tied to revenue. But even more important than that, compliance is in place to actually help companies protect data, protect people, build programs, mitigate risk, like all of those pieces. And so we don't just stop at compliance, we keep going because we're really looking to get the return on investment. Having a SOC 2 report from a very low, subpar audit firm, which sadly do exist out there, yeah, that might open some doors, but when customers really start to dig into that, then that alone is not producing the return that it really has the capability to return. Are you seeing similar?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll bring that same example in, like that sales kickoff, but one thing of note, compliance alone is not the answer. That brought me back to one of the discussions we had on the podcast, which was GRC, that inverted pyramid mindset, that stereotype is because everyone just assumes it's only compliance,
Yep.
and they forget about the governance and risk piece of it, where you were big on the risk piece, I'm big on the governance piece, and that's part of the discussion that needs to happen here, is that risk part of it. We're doing enterprise risk here, not just compliance risk. And so for the sales piece, when I talk to my friends who were like, well, what would we even talk about in those meetings? It's, well, listen to what their goals are for the year. Listen to what
That's
their
correct.
objectives are.
From
Now,
a
what
business
risk
perspective, yes.
exactly? And then what
Yep.
risks could prevent these objectives from occurring or from being successful at your metrics? That's when you talk with sales leadership, the sales team or your growth or revenue teams, and figure out, okay, that's how you go proactive. And that's your key risk indicator that we talk about, where they're going to be putting in all these projections for the current year based off of metrics from last year, their KPIs, their business objectives. So you get a full circle look at it. You get to look behind at what happened last year. How are we going to translate that to this year? Then
Yep.
from our standpoint, it's, well, what risks are what's going to prevent you from doing that? What can we do to potentially find risk mitigating factors? And usually with sales, it's always something tied to, it's usually we could lose a sale because we don't have a mature cybersecurity program or we don't have this assessment. Okay, well, we can fix that. We can
Yep.
start implementing controls and improving. And that's that continuous evolvement of, how much better it sounds to a customer when someone goes to them and says, "Oh yeah, we have this, this SaaS platform, but we are, we do internal and external assessments. We have these things that we're in place with." All of a sudden, you're proactively driving that conversation, and again, it just comes to that effective communication. How is it that the GRC world is being able to communicate that to sales? Because
Yeah,
that's on us as
it
GRC
is.
professionals to be proactive in that conversation. And so that's one of the big points I wanted to hit on here, is that ROI you have to be out there talking to every group in the
Yeah,
company to start those discussions. What are your objectives? What are your goals? Okay, what could prevent these from occurring? What can we do to start,
enable that. Yeah.
evolving our controls? So
Yeah, no, exactly. And you're right. And it's not anybody's fault, but everybody is responsible for that. So GRC folks are responsible to be engaged with the broader business. Sales folks are responsible to communicate their objectives. I mean, this is just the strategy of the communication of the organization to keep everybody engaged. Where are we all going? I remember even when I was back in corporate America, I'd have folks on the team come to me and say, I don't understand how what I do fits in with the bigger picture. Oh, okay. Well, we need to fix that because you need to understand this little task, or, these would typically be more junior resources. These things you do here, here's how it bubbles up. Here's how it contributes to the whole of the organization. That's exactly what you're saying here is compliance is enabling sales big time. And then they have expectations of doing more things. They're also close to the customer, so they hear things, and then that helps us on the back end pivot to be prepared, for that. We had one client that they were, they had it's the other way. They had a vendor that they were basically getting really tight with as far as their business service model, and then it is actually digging into really what that vendor's cyber posture looked like, then helped equip executives to be like, wait a minute, okay, there's more to this picture than, oh, they have that, they have that. I need to think, is this really who we're going to go to this level? Is this really how we're going to do it? It's not intended to stop them, it's intended to give them the full picture. And that's where, again, these are not silo activities. I want to just hit a little bit to what's on the screen there. So, especially for, executives or heads of states who might be listening and like, okay, but I don't understand. Like we have our stamp, we have our seal. I don't understand why that's not good enough. Great question, but it's not. And here's why. Compliance is a minimum bar expectation. That's what it is. It's not really designed to give you what you need to, okay, grow, go be a good steward of your company now. Go do it. That's not what it is. It is a minimum bar, point in time expectation. A lot of the compliance frameworks are scoped. So CMMC only cares about CUI. Hard stop. That's all they care about. That's all CMMC cares about. So if you're like, oh, we do this, so we're really great at cyber. No, you're not, if that's all you do. PCI only cares about the cardholder data environment. Like that's what it cares about. And that's okay. That's by design. So there's nothing wrong with that. So the point is, you want to build a program that protects the organization based on the objectives and the strategy, like you're talking about, Joe, based on the risks that actually exist. And then, yes, you go after compliance for sure. But this whole notion that, oh, we have the stamp, so we're good. No, that's not what this is. The stamp is basically like I drive all the time on the road, and every once in a while, a police officer, I go through his radar, and he looks at the car generally and looks at my speed and, "Oh, okay, I'm not gonna pull you over." 5 minutes ago, I was going 140 miles an hour. I wasn't, to be clear, but 5 minutes ago, I was ridiculously breaking the law, but, "Oh, you didn't actually see that part. You only saw this very moment, so woohoo, I give you a letter that you're an excellent driver." That's not what this stuff means. And customers who ask for, "Do you have your SOC 2?" I say this to companies all the time. They're actually not asking, were you able to pass a SOC 2 audit by any means? That's not what they're asking. What they're asking is, do you value security? Do you protect your data in your company? Do you do these things? What do you think, Joe?
no, agree. It speaks to that, that inverted pyramid, that second line with kind of that false sense of security,
Yep.
where too many times I've heard in the past 20 plus years, I just want to do enough to pass the audit. And
Ooh,
the number one
so
rule
bad.
I will always come back with is just you have to build an environment or a cybersecurity program or internal control environment,
Why?
not
Why,
to a
Joe?
framework,
No, but why,
uh,
Joe? Why do you tell them that? Why is that not good enough?
because a lot of times they will, the bare minimum doesn't scale and adapt if the company grows.
That's a
And
good
so it's
point.
just patchwork fix after patchwork fix.
Great
and
point.
then all of a sudden it's just like we have to tear it down, and then it's going to cost even more. But
Correct.
if you design and build an environment that can adapt and scale with growth, that and then as you're building that out, tie it into the company objective, kind of like what we're saying here,
Mm,
tie it to KPIs, tie it to KRs, integrate the two,
yeah.
because if you don't, it's going to cost you more in the long run. Because again, I've seen it, unfortunately, we've all had those clients in the past. I just want to pass the audit. I'm going to do the bare
Yeah.
minimum, or they'll shoehorn in controls
Yeah.
which aren't designed well or operating well. And then it
Yeah.
just becomes a mess after a while. And like you said,
Yeah.
in the current day, the SOC 2 typically isn't enough anymore. They're going to ask you, send
Yeah.
me stuff for your
Yeah.
cybersecurity program. Do you
Yep.
do any other audits or assessment? And then we have a question here which kind of ties in where the question is, how can we effectively communicate the distinct value of a GRC risk
Mm,
assessment
I see
and what
that.
it brings to an organization's risk posture, especially where cybersecurity assessments tend to receive the majority of recognition because that is the hot button topic these last couple of years and still is for boards and executives. And the stereotype, while GRC activities are often perceived as just checkbox exercises. And I'll take first crack at it. This is where I think the skill set that you're seeing in GRC professionals, it's no longer the traditional I know controls, I know risk. It's no, you
Yeah.
gotta have a well-rounded skill set to be able to communicate
Yeah.
what that brings to the company. And this ties back to what we were saying earlier. Yes, it's a group effort, but it's also on us in the GRC world to be able to communicate that value. How can
Yep.
we effectively communicate that to how, the C levels, the boards can understand it? Because yeah, I mean, the question is valid. A lot of times they're like, what are we doing for cybersecurity? Do we have this audit? And it becomes that checkbox mentality. And
Yep.
you have to be able to get out of that because, especially in cybersecurity, you need a continuous monitoring, ever evolving environment.
Oh, of course.
The check the box exercise won't work. The pass the one audit a year won't work. You have to have something that will continuously drive it. So,
Yeah, no,
um,
that's great. Thanks for noticing the question. You're absolutely right. I will go back to the GRC. Unfortunately, we live in a C world. GNR forgotten. And so I think that's really how you start to move the needle is you've got to talk about the R. Like the executives understand risk. You don't have to explain that to them. What you have to do, just exactly what you said, Joe, is that's on us to communicate effectively, communicate well, and embed this into the organization, but from a very risk perspective because they understand risk. And you kind of said it a minute ago as well. The false sense of security. Can I tell you? I'm going to get T-shirts made one day. Like sometimes it would just be better to do nothing. Like when you go buy the tool that has the green check marks, that has the subpar audit firm, and then boom, 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 you got your report. That's a false sense of security that we've actually done something that we there's probably a lot of holes to poke in that because it's probably not been done the appropriate way. And so that false sense of security actually introduces more risk into the organization.
mhm,
So it might have just been better to do nothing. Plus, it's not terribly full of integrity to our customers because again, they're not asking, can you go past the audit in the easiest way possible and just give us a report? That's not what they're asking when they send over those questionnaires. They're asking, "Do you actually do this stuff? Can I be safe in working with you? Can you give me confidence that this will be?" And you said something earlier too, like more and more, you said SOC 2 is not good enough. That's what you said, which is not wrong. Now you get the questionnaires, you get the interviews, depending on, if you're in some of these high industries like banking and financial services, you might even get an on-site visit. I mean, those are starting
mhm,
up as well again. Then you have to be able to answer these questions, and so it's more than just, "Oh, I have this report." It certainly helps, but some of those are even, like people like us, we know audit firms to look for that we're like, "Yeah, this paper ain't worth nothing." I actually just saw one. One of our clients sent over a HIPAA was it a HIPAA assessment? I think it was a HIPAA assessment for a SaaS, and it was from one of the tools. There was absolutely no evidence of human testing. It was literally all from the tool.
mhm,
Being a practitioner, I know how you can make that look green, easy schmeasy, no problem. And so it's worthless. And that's what, a CISO of a very large company, I'm like, yeah, dude, sorry, we need to talk to the vendor. This is really not worth anything, quite frankly. And so that really is where it's going.
And then I think we might touch on this in a little bit. I want to keep us on track, but another way on the because we keep preaching on and harping on effective communication, and
Yeah,
what does
it's
that look
important.
like?
Yeah.
And so part of that is, I think the question might be asking about how do you measure that ROI? How do you quantify it? How do you put it in that language that typical senior executive or board
Yeah.
leadership wants to hear? And so there's some specific examples we probably touch on in a little bit, but I just wanted to bring that point up that, yeah, I know we keep talking about it, but we'll be given, the explanation on that one here in a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, metrics are huge. They're a great way to communicate, and they're a great way to take the emotion out of it. We're just looking at the metrics. You have to define, you mentioned
Mhm.
KPIs and KRIs earlier. Ideally, those align to the organization. They're not just GRC metrics in a bubble, but hey, if you got to start there, start there. Um, some of the GRC tools, far too few of them, in my opinion, but some are really good at having risk and controls tied together, for example. And then, but you got to do that work to do that. And then having a risk dashboard that updates every day. So if a control fails today, my risk posture is deteriorated from yesterday. And so to be able to show that, so all this underlying activity and work that we do, that's how you start to show that value, a dashboard, metrics, KPIs, KRIs. That's how you start that communication. Project plans, again, these should be tied to strategies that align to the organization. Hey, the organization, we need to get FedRAMP, for example. Okay, great. FedRAMP is a 12 to 18-month project, CMMC as well. How do we articulate that to the executives? Do they know what's going on? Do they know the real cost and the real effort that goes into this? Are we keeping ourselves accountable? Are we celebrating the wins? Like all of this stuff is part of communication and how you keep the value up in front of people. So those are all like really super important. We do have some why when it is zero return. I just want to look at these real quick. The only one, so we've talked about checkbox compliance. Honestly, that's just a no. Even if you're a small startup company, you don't have to do it that way. It's not, it's not common sense. Like we have we have one client in particular who just I was had so much respect for this person right away because they were like, yeah, I don't really want to do it that way. I feel like I need to be doing something more. And I'm like, yeah, you go. That's awesome. And then this whole vapor, oh, buy my tool and the green check marks, hit the button. That's just not realistic. Like, come on. And then not having a plan, that really goes back to the strategy. And then, of course, oh my gosh, the dreaded, we passed the audit, so we must be safe. But the reality is, this is not a cost, this is an investment. So let's shift to that mindset. It's so easy to think, oh, we got to do this, we got to buy this, we got to make this happen. So those are all cost, cost, cost. And yes, there's money tied to it. I get that. There's also resources, there's also opportunity cost, there's so many other things. So Joe, how do you help people? Because, you and I have the advantage that we have this kind of financial embedding in our background. And so my whole world is around ROI, sadly, even sometimes personal decisions. But how do you explain this to people, that how do you start to shift the mind that don't think of these as costs? These are investments, but what are you going to get back from those investments?
Exactly. And it touches to a point on the last slide you had, which is, doing it without a plan. That's
Yep.
the number one thing I see
Ooh, yep.
across the board in 20 plus years in the industry is it sounds so much like it's common sense, yet so many companies don't have a plan. They're like, "Oh, this
No, they
customer
don't.
says you have to do this, so
Yeah.
we need to go get compliant with this, or we need to
Yeah.
go and do this with our, cybersecurity program." And there's no plan. It's just it's almost do the bare minimum to say we did it and be done with it. No, we need to fully plan this out from beginning to end. And I think that's one of the things I will say. I started my career in financial auditing, quickly
Yeah.
pivoted to risk advisory. But one of the things financial audit taught me was to be very detail oriented.
Yeah.
And that kind of ties to this is what's that plan going to be? You need to be CMMC compliant. Okay, let's lay out that roadmap. Yes, there is a cost attributed to it, but what's the overall value of it? Will it, there could be some built-in efficiencies created to your control environment all of a sudden.
Yeah.
What's our go-to-market off of this? How are we going to use this to drive revenue? What's that value going to look like? You know, it just becomes a more value proposition when you put it out in a plan, lay it out for all
Yeah.
details and everyone to see, and not just, oh, we have to do something because we have to be compliant, the end.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
and then,
that's your intentionals that's there on the slide. You're absolutely right. Be intentional, have a plan.
yeah, and then to speak again to the communication piece, communicate that plan,
Yeah.
continuously update, you know, the stakeholders of what's going on and how things are going, because ultimately, without that plan, then I'll liken it to, always, I don't know why I always use ERP implementations because I've been through a lot of those. The ones that aren't planned out, what happens? Delays, cost overruns, change
Oh
orders after
yeah,
change order.
that's
That's what's
correct.
going to happen here if you don't have
Yeah.
that plan on how you're going to be going through this process. So that's where the investment comes in. It's, yes, there's an upfront cost, but how do we quantify that value on the back end?
Yeah.
Well, we'll talk with our revenue team. We'll talk with our operational team to see if there's some labor efficiencies that get created out of it. Is there actual revenue efficiencies? Do we drive revenue? So
Yeah.
it becomes a plan again. You've got to involve all affected groups and be able to communicate it.
Yeah, no, that's great. I kind of think it, but like this, I want to cook a fancy meal, but I don't have a recipe. And well, I kind of know it has this in it. So I run to the store. Oh, I don't have that. I run to the store. I go get it. I come back. I'm like, oh, wait, I think it has this other thing. I run to the store again and I get this. And so basically, then I end up burning stuff. I end up wasting stuff because I keep running to the store and I don't have what I need. And the whole thing, it's just haphazard and messy and ultimately expensive. It takes me multiple times longer and I don't even get as good of a result. Where had I taken the time to go, okay, this is what I'm looking to do, put my plan together. This is what I need. This is what I don't have. Here's how I'm going to work to do that. It would have been an efficient process. If I needed to pivot in the moment, I could have been much more prepared to pivot in that moment. And so that's really what it is. So no, you're definitely right. I want to answer this question because this is making me laugh. How does an information security program begin to align strategies to the business when the business has failed to document what its goals are? And that happens all the time, sadly. The whole concept of a business strategy is almost non-existent in organizations, and then an information security strategy is very lacking in the world, which is unfortunate. And so, how can GRC drive this forward for the C-suite? Excellent question, because that really is what we operate in, quite unfortunately. So, so much. I always say this. So, cybersecurity is risk. If you want to know, I mean, that's what we do every day, all day, ultimately, which is a heavy technical risk, but it's risk mindset. If you want to know who your best risk practitioners are in the organization, it's going to be your cyber folks because it's how they think every day. And so we see this happen all the time. We work with companies, we help them build out risk process. So end-to-end risk management, risk register, nice, good, sustainable, informative risk process. Then what happens? The business says, "Oh, that's really nice. Can we have that? Oh, would you like this now too?" Uh-huh. And so it bubbles up into the organization. And so that would be my answer to the question is how can we drive this forward? First of all, we have to have patience. People are people, they're hard to change, they're slow. So we be patient. We don't dictate, we don't force, we don't turn into a bully. I've seen that firsthand. It does not work. It's very miserable for everybody. So we're patient with people, we have grace. However, we are constantly pushing the envelope and giving good examples. So we lead by example. That's what we do. We communicate well. We start to put together metrics. We start to push this forward. We ask questions that they should be asking us, but we ask them, hey, are you guys trying to go into a new market segment this year? Oh, I don't know. We haven't thought about that. Or, oh, yeah, we talked about that last week. Great. Have you thought about what the compliance implications are for this? What? Yeah, so we be proactive. Now, obviously, that's all the culture of the organization. That's how much you've invested in really building relationships with people across the organization. This is big time people management, which I say all the time in information security. We have to be good at the people game because that's, ultimately what we do. But the reality is we lead by example. I have seen this so many times where we build stuff in security or GRC, whatever you want to call it. And then the rest of the organization says, oh, that's good. We want that. So you lead by example. That's the answer to the question. And be patient. Joe, what would you add? Great
I
question.
will reiterate the patience part of it because I've
Yep,
typically
exactly.
seen this in like the small to medium sized company space or startup because it's fast paced. You have to be moving nonstop.
Yes.
And so sometimes there just isn't time for some leadership to sit down and document objectives when things are so fast paced. But yeah, lead by example. And then the second part is at some point that conversation of let's just stop for a second. What are our objectives? What are we
Yeah.
trying to do right now? What is our strategy? That has to be defined. That's not a GRC issue. That's just
No.
overall business 101. Like I know again it sounds like common sense, but without a defined strategy, how are your employees even going to know what they're doing and how to do their job without knowing what that
Yeah.
objective is? And that is gonna hurt in the long run. So at some point, there needs to be that everyone just take a second, let's sit and talk about this and let's define this out. Because if you can't communicate it internally, how are you gonna communicate it externally?
Yeah.
So that can, to Sherry's point, be driven by
Hmm?
one of the departments, whether it's GRC or another department, but that's more of a business need than just the GRC ROI discussion, in my opinion. But
Yeah.
it
But
does happen.
it does, but those teams, if they wanna be the best of what they can bring to the organization, they need a context in which they're working. Are you expecting me to just sit here and check boxes? Are we growing? Like, what are we doing? Are we planning for this other thing that's coming that we haven't really heard about yet? Or by the way, maybe there's something you don't even know that would actually position this company way better if you would just talk to me. And so, yeah, it definitely is a matter of talking. But anyway, so okay, so what does ROI actually look like? And this is more the return aspect. So we know what investment is: time, resources, money, all that. But what is the return? So here's some returns. This is how you start to frame this. Customer trust. Okay, customer trust is huge. It is not an intangible. It is not negotiable in these days and times. Cybersecurity is hot topic. Bad actors are right now trying to figure out how they're going to break into stuff and how they're going to get ahead of us. So this is truly just a race, and customers know it. And so a successful business is engages customer trust that then allows them to have those long-standing relationships, reputation in the market, and all of that. We've talked about market expansion. There are definitely compliance frameworks that can help with market expansion, and people need to understand what those might be, and then what is going to be the investment of that, but what are we actually going to get back? We actually had one of our clients reach out to us and asked about a framework because they were asked by a customer, a potential customer, and to get it, and they didn't have it, and it was so cool because it was truly an ROI conversation. They're like, we don't know if this customer is worth enough to actually do this thing, so we want to know what's really involved and how that fits with what we do today already, and then we'll kind of make a business decision. And I was like, dang, that's great. Like, what a
Go.
great way to think about this thing. What
No,
else what else does return look like?
so one of the things you always hear a lot of is, when you can automate something that used to be manual. So
Yep.
are there audit efficiencies we can create, save however many hours? We had this audit last year that took this many hours. This year we've upgraded our processes, so it should take less time. There's a cost savings there. That's a measurable ROI that can be discussed.
Yep.
Um, oh, because of that, we've created some operational efficiencies for some of our operations controls owners. Okay, what does that labor cost saving look like?
Yep.
Then how are you repurposing their hours now that they save 2 or 3 hours not having to do this manual process? They are now doing this, which is driving something else.
Yep.
And you've just, there's ways you can quantify it
Yeah.
and, reallocating resources, reduction in losses, from risk mitigation activities. The number one thing I will say here, though, that I've seen be the problem is inaccuracies of the people who overestimate the value sometimes
Yeah.
because they're trying to look good for management, so they'll overshoot. We saved $20 million in this. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's the old go back to grade school math. Show me your work.
Yeah, that's
You,
funny.
you,
Yeah,
you have to
that's
be accurate and be honest
yeah.
in those savings when
Yeah.
communicating that up. But um, but that's where I see it, and then there's, because it's hard to quantify some of these qualitative things like customer trust. Sometimes they'll expand services. There's a measurable
Yeah.
tactic, but building that relationship obviously has, you know, we're coming from a heavy qualitative world and trying to quantify things, so it can be difficult.
Yeah, it's in some
Just
cases.
you'll just need to put that effort in to quantify some of these metrics, these KRIs, and then when you actually can put a value to it, then that's what speaks, numbers, dollars, metrics
Yep.
speak to management and boards. Just be able to communicate, show your work, show us
Yep.
how you got to this number and how we got here. Um, I see a couple more questions that came through,
Yeah, hold on.
but
So yeah, we worked with a client a few years ago and they were fixated, for example, on SOC 1. While I get that's important, but they were like, meanwhile, they were giving SOC 2 no attention. And so I was like, hold on. First of all, those two are very closely aligned. So let's talk through that. I had them go back and in their sales cycle, how many of your customers asked for one or the other? What are your customers asking for? Come to find out, I think there was 13 customers that asked for the SOC 1. 13. Okay, great. 13. Meanwhile, there's hundreds that asked for the SOC 2. So it immediately pivoted the executive perspective. Like, oh, you're kind of focused on the wrong thing. And by the way, if you do your SOC 2 right, you mostly have your SOC 1 covered anyway. So you're asking the wrong question. And so there's a way that you can quantify that. Like if how many customers actually ask for these things? Well, if we didn't have it, that what revenue is tied to that? You see how this flows out. So there's where you can kind of quantify those types of things. Someone and then you were mentioning a question and I want to answer this question and then yes, I'm sure you have a thought as well. But I want to say this because it ties to the return aspect. As AI transforms GRC from periodic point in time assessments to continuous compliance monitoring, woohoo, and real time risk and control evaluation, woohoo, great question. What is the strategic approach organizations should adopt to leverage automation effectively, not just reduce time and cost, but to fundamentally enhance the value and responsiveness of the GRC function? Excellent, excellent question. You're right. We are not paper pushers. We meet some people in our space and they're just paper pushers. They get this, they put it over here. They get this, they put it over here. This is not what we are. That's not ROI to be fair. That's paper pushing. What we are is we bring return for the investment even into us, our salaries within an organization. So what is the answer to this question? Well, here's the cool part. As we get smarter to use the tools in front of us, it actually frees up bandwidth to really look at the right things. Right now, companies, most of these teams are non-existent, super skinny, or it's some poor security guy that, oh, you can just do this on the side, right? No. And so that's not what this discipline is. This is a practice. This is a discipline. This is a skill set. So the more we can get smart about automation, the more we can find the things we really need to see. So the way you turn this back to return is, for example, right now we're so used to, is that policy approved? Did we do our UAR? Did we do that? Okay, great. Yay. What we really should be doing is looking at those things that happen every day that would introduce risk into the organization, like access control. That kind of stuff can be automated. Let the automation do it. And then there's where we start to report up some return on this investment is, hey, did you know that we caught X number of wrong access controls that would have exposed this? And because of our ongoing monitoring and automation, we were actually able to catch those and correct those within X number of hours. Hey, executive, do you understand the exposure that this was? We were also able to catch that this process was highly manual and there was ways to automate it and make it more stealthy so we don't have that problem again. We continuously improved it. So there's what you get for your money, executive, is you get an open door or an open window in your business and in your data that we just found that bad boy and we just closed it. You're welcome. There's the return on the investment.
Yep. And one of the the ROIs you speak of is like that incident response. Being able to quickly address the issue and resolve it. And this topic here could be its own
Oh, yeah.
probably 3 or 4 hour discussion on GRC methodology. But
Correct. Yeah.
the more forward thinking GRC groups are already implementing or have implemented a continuous monitoring type control environment to be
Oh,
able
it's
to
it's way more rare. It's so sadly rare. We work with a lot of very large companies,
Mhm.
publicly traded companies, and I'm just, oh, it's tragic as a general rule, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's the thing is this is more to me a methodology discussion on the evolution of what GRC is
Yeah.
currently going through.
Ooh,
But
future topic. I love it. Like, what is this thing?
for like a return piece, the example I'll give, the easiest one, back in October, we had a couple of outages.
Oh,
One
big
with Azure, one
outages.
with AWS,
Worldwide outages.
and
Yes.
the amount of articles out there of companies which were not prepared,
Yeah.
lost a day
But they
or
passed their
more of
audits,
business.
Joe. But they passed their audits, but they weren't prepared
Exactly.
for the real thing. Yep.
Um, all of a sudden, oh wait, multi-region redundancy might be a good idea,
Oh, yeah, might be worth the
it's
cost.
those are the types of things that you can then quantify, like how many companies lost a day of business or couldn't recover data for a full day. So it, there's quantifiable ways to measure it. And unfortunately, like the question was asking, that movement to periodic point in time to continuous needs to happen faster.
It
But
does, big time. Yeah, and somebody asked a question on that note, how should organizations assess the long-term viability of these incumbents over the next 5 years? Yeah, great question. Is it prudent to start exploring emerging or underdog platforms that may be better positioned to capitalize on AI native capabilities and the shift toward continuous monitoring? Joe, what do you think?
yeah, I think just as a best practice, it's always good every 2 or 3 years, I always say,
I
like
agree.
in procurement, to
I
just look
agree.
at other options and know what's out there.
I totally
And
agree.
then to kind of speak to the tools which are now all starting to use some type of AI tool, that's where your AI governance comes into place. What's your AI governance policy? What's going to go into these AI tools if you go to these platforms? But, you know, a lot of these platforms are great foundation builders if you use them right.
Oh,
Unfortunately, a
there's the
lot of
big if.
companies, especially and usually, again, I'll go back to ERP implementation. It it's that mindset of, oh, if we install it or implement it, it's a magic fix. We don't have to do anything. And I see a lot of GRC tools
Yeah.
end up becoming basically a glorified data repository. Just throw a
Yep.
bunch of stuff in there, throw some documents
Absolutely.
in there
Yep.
without really being able to utilize and integrate it into your GRC strategy. So,
Yeah. Totally
you
agree.
know, it, for any platform, whether it's a big name one or a small new underdog one. There's a lots of good ones that are out there. It will come down to how you use it to if you're really going to get a true ROI off of it. So, I
Yeah.
mean, there's no magic answer to that other than just the tried and true method of how are you going to use it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think a lot of well, okay. The ones that aren't configurable at all, they only do what they do. But all the way up, from the mid-market GRC tools up to the Archers and the ServiceNows, Metric Stream, Logic 8. I mean, there's several of them out there. If you said it, if they're fully, like, implemented. That's the whole point. If you're not getting the automation, if you're not getting the dashboards and the metrics, if you're not having the executive conversations, if those tools are not configured in a way or built in a way to really provide that to you, then one, it may not be the tool's fault, but it could be that some of those high price point tools, you don't have the resources to get them where they need to be. So then you would take a look at, okay, is there a more mid-range tool that out of the box gets me closer to where I need to be? But then, Joe, you said it, real super danger. Like, oh my gosh, don't buy the tool and expect it's just going to be done for you. And that's the problem. You get the mid-market, low-range tools that are selling it like, oh, buy my tool and it does everything. You don't want Archer because you have to configure it. Oh my gosh, you still have to have processes and configuration. Give me a break. It's just, do you want an IT staff to run your tool or you want to be able to do it like in a more kind of SaaS way? That's why there's so many tools in the world. There's different places and spaces and they work better for some companies than others. But I see it way too often where they'll buy, companies buy tools and they maybe get it implemented for one use case, maybe don't. They think the tool is the problem. It's really not. It's all of that. And so, it's kind of like what's on the screen. GRC is not the thing that doesn't have value. It has tremendous value. The problem is how it's presented. The value of it is lost. So I bet you love the line in red there, Joe. Communication is really the fundamental issue. If we just talk about things and, oh, we had 3 controls fail this month. Okay, who care? I don't care. Who, what, doesn't matter. But if you say, oh, this risk that you thought was here, it's not there anymore. What? Why? Well, because Joe didn't do his job or this automation failed or, whatever, or we totally missed this gap altogether. Then now it starts to be, well, we need to fix that. Okay, great. Now you start to get that executive buy-in. So it really is shifting from, controls, frameworks, all this nerdy stuff, testing to, hey, what's our risk? What's our exposure? How are we contributing to help the business grow? And it's all of that and really being the undergirding of that.
I'll highlight that last bullet point on executive thinking, the confidence in decision making. That
Love
is
it.
one area that I think GRC can help drive that is not talked about enough. And so, again, it's kind of a common sense, like logical thing to think of. Oh, the more information someone has, the more informed decision they can make. Well, that goes for business too. If they have, they have finance and accounting review of it. Oh, this is dealing with our operational side of the house. So we have operations leadership into it. Why not get the other viewpoints in there too? Like, oh, wait, if we're going to go forward with that strategy, here are some areas in GRC that will be impacted, but this is what we can do to help drive it. That can help in that confidence in making that decision. And
Yeah.
so it ties to a question we just got, which is if we had to advise
I
GRC
know.
teams to
Yep.
change just one thing about how they present their work to leadership, what would it be? This is, uh, I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this one, but that one to
Okay.
me is on us to know the room and the audience we speak to and be able to communicate that to that room.
Yeah.
So, like, if I'm talking to you, Sherry, I'm going to go super technical and nerdy, talking about every metric ratio possible. But if
Yeah.
I'm going to be taking this to the board,
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go up and speak the board language. So it's on me to be able to, again, effectively communicate to that audience the value that I'm trying to portray. So that's the one thing I would change is, for us to break out of this, stereotype, the siloed group, we have to be able to communicate it to multiple audiences, whether
Yeah.
that's management. Heck, I've joined sales calls before. I've got to talk to potential customers,
Correct.
but how do I change, what that value brings? So that's the one thing is being able to take what you do and be able to communicate it to multiple audiences.
And to change who you're talking to. And that's a
Mhm.
soft skill, quite frankly. And if somebody doesn't feel like they have that, well, go get training. I got trained as a coach years ago because I was like, I want to be able to communicate better to people. So it was a different lens of, plus it was a break from IT and security. And so it was just a kind of a different lens and a different thought process. So invest in yourself to be able to do that if you don't readily know what that means. The other things I would add to that is transparency and integrity. Like those are huge. Like be transparent, be clear. Don't play this game where, oh, I'm the expert and I know this stuff and you can't possibly understand what I know. Don't do that. Be very transparent, very clear. Help them understand a lot of what we do is coaching and helping the business do that. And then integrity. Don't sweep stuff under the rug. Don't be the negative naysayer all the time, but don't sweep stuff under the rug. Be transparent. It's just like you said earlier, Joe. Show your work. Be willing to show your work. I'm not trying to manipulate or make anything happen here. I'm just this is what it is, very plainly. I'm being transparent and I'm not trying to hide anything. And so definitely do that as well. And then it kind of goes back to what we're talking here. We got to stop talking in all these nerdy terms. We got to talk in the language of the business, which is really risk and growth. And that's the stuff that matters to them. We've touched on several of these things, but I'm sure you have some additional comments on this. So please.
I think,
Avoided costs, we talked about that.
mhm.
Credibility, you talked a little bit about that. Like, don't try to put people in fear. Don't try to cover up. I don't think we talked too much. Well, we talked a little bit about the last one as well, translation. But what do you have to add?
Oh, agree. I mean, it's that clear communication, like you said, be transparent when you're translating this. Um, don't fear monger. That's a big one because
That's
I've
a
seen
big
that
one.
routine,
Insecurity. It doesn't work.
but you know, be open in that conversation when you translate it and be ready to adjust
Yeah.
because there's going to be some give and take in that conversation. And that's what it's about. Like, you know, it, it rarely ever is 100% one way or the other. So
Yeah.
when you're going to talk to these different groups, and that's the one thing I'll say also needs to be done. Be more proactive in talking to the different groups of the
Yes.
company.
Yeah.
Learn their processes, learn their objectives, learn what they're doing, learn what their risks are, what keeps them up at night, as everyone always says. But with the translation of it, it's okay, here's how we're addressing those groups and just be clear with it. And I think, it goes back to like the first bullet point. If you're talking to accounting and finance, they're probably more numbers driven, financial
Hmm.
model driven. So how can we speak in that language? You go to operations. All right, depending on the nature of the industry, you're talking operationally with them. You're talking to regulatory compliance, you're speaking in other ways. So
Yeah.
be able to, truly learn the company and then be able to speak to their side.
Yeah, and as a really practical example, I think people don't think about like the avoided cost. That's definitely your financial background showing through. But it could be simple, like start small, start simple. So, for example, we do an audit and it takes, I'm just making this up, 200 man hours. Okay, great. But we have this greater strategy and plan that we're going to automate some of this stuff and we're going to be able to reuse, we're going to work with the control owners so they know what they need to do, we're going to do this stuff. So then in year 2 of the audit you measure it again, and now we were able to be successful with that same audit. It only took 80 internal man hours. I'm totally making that up, but you see already. So in the positioning is there's 120 hours that people we already pay for, they were able to go do something else. And they were able to do something else that was meaningful to the value they bring to the organization. So again, that opportunity cost is huge. Or maybe it's a case of, hey, last year our CISO had to be predominantly involved in the audit. Or maybe our CISO, here's a better example. Our CISO had to do the questionnaires because we wanted to make sure they're right. We were afraid that there'd be wrong information. So, and he ended up, or she ended up spending, 200 hours over the year doing all these questionnaires. Okay, great. Well, we were able to develop a process, develop a library, maybe use AI, maybe buy, X tool. And now we're able to have lower level folks do those initial passes, and the CISO just has to review. So now the CISO's 200 hours went down to 10 hours, and the AI took over 50 of those hours. I'm just making that up. And then the 100 left were lower end people. Woohoo, that's a win. So now the CISO, who's responsible for the protection of the organization overall, is not filling out stupid questionnaires. Like, there's a return on investment right there. So
Mhm.
ideally, that time was respent toward making the team better, making the tech stack better, protecting the organization, actually spending time with customers, whatever else it was. There's your return on investment right there.
Yep. And I'll try an outside of the box example that I saw one time where GRC worked with HR on internal attrition,
Yeah,
and they had a high turnover rate.
there you
What
go.
was causing it? They added that as part of the risk assessment, addressed it,
Yep.
and there's a cost avoidance there of we lost 10 people last year for a small company. That's a lot. This
Yeah.
year we lost 3. We avoided the cost of having to go through the hiring process, which can be expensive
Oh, it
for
is. And ramp
potentially
up.
up to 7 people.
Yeah.
The investment to go and find someone, the investment to bring them on board, and the continuous investment after. So
Yep.
there's an HR example of how GRC can come in and provide an ROI
Yep.
to the people department as well. So
Yeah, and this is why risk assessments are not to pass audits. I cannot, like, that's not even funny. That doesn't even make me chuckle to say that, because it's so horrific out there. Oh, we did our risk assessment, we passed our audit. It's not why we do risk assessments. If you're doing risk assessment for that reason, just stop. It means nothing. Just stop. A risk assessment is to really dig into what is really bringing risk into the organization and what are we actually going to do, and then measuring, just to what you said, measuring what did we get, what was the return on investing that, and how do we bring that risk down. That's why you do a risk assessment, not to pass an audit. But I rarely, except for companies we work with, I rarely see risk processes that are actually pretty good. They're better in banking, but they're not, they're still, unfortunately, there's still a lot of checkbox that goes in, it takes place in there. So as we wrap up here, basically planning, we talked about this. You got to plan. Like, this stuff is not haphazard. If you're just running to the store every time you need something, it's highly efficient. It's prone to failure. You're going to ruin and lose advantage of other things because your attention is over here. It just, it's not the right way to do this thing. Yes, we have to do this all while the business is running. We can't stop the world. I used to say that all the time. If I could just stop the world, you can't. You got to keep doing it, in line with what's going on. You got to enjoy the incremental wins, but you can definitely have this approach of planning and aligning to the overall strategy. So as we wrap up here, what would you like to leave the audience with? What is, like, one main point that you want to leave them with?
yeah, definitely. It goes back to what we said at the beginning. Let's shift this stereotype, this mindset that GRC is a sunk cost, a necessary evil. No, we have lots of value we can provide to a company in this space. And unfortunately, it also falls on us to communicate that value because it's not understood out there because so many people think of it just from a compliance standpoint.
Yeah.
And you know what? It can be that way if you allow it to be, but a more proactive measure to understand the value that you're bringing to the company and then being able to communicate that to leadership and to other departments can go a long way. And the more successful companies, those small to medium sized companies I've worked with in the past, the successful ones are the ones that have a truly unified approach where
Yeah.
all value is understood from all areas of the company, and they work together to enhance and drive more value to customers and to external parties. So
Yeah.
for me, it's just understand that we're not a sunk cost. We're not just an expense line item. We are a lot more than that, and
Yeah.
we just need to be more vocal about it.
Yep, I totally agree. It's definitely a practice. It's not just, something we can learn over the weekend and, oh, okay, we do this thing now. It's not that. It's a whole discipline. It's a whole practice. And yeah, I love it. I'm a total nerd. Thank you so much. At Hotman Group, we definitely will we do complimentary GRC health checks. So reach out if that interests you, just to kind of get a lay of the land of where you are on these topics. We also have the podcast. Joe and I were on the podcast, I believe in December. So subscribe to the Art of Cybersecurity podcast. Would love to have you there. We have future sessions coming up. So look for those and register. Otherwise, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Really appreciate your attendance today. Joe, thank you so much. It was truly a pleasure, as I knew it would be. Thank you for sharing your insight, your wisdom, your experience, and most of all, just, being an awesome person. So I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank everyone for joining.
You good?